Throughout the years of Salarian rule, the Federal Republic of Ethanopiana was morphed from a united progressive democracy into a reservation for liberals under the Salarian government. This reservation was incredibly small, containing only the united Ethanopianan island, but it was secure under the emperor's protection. That was, of course, until the empire decided to rescind this reservation due to its perceived decadence. That's why, upon the collapse of the decadent Salarians, the Ethanopianans remained resilient from the crisis. While we may speak Wolcodian as a lingua franca and have almost completely abandoned our old culture, we are still loyal to our old traditions of worldwide democratization. Finally victorious after the collapse of the Salarian Empire, the Federal Republic of Ethanopiana is a resurgent power and voice for democratic ideals. Here, Ethanopiana stands as a left-wing democracy, but one that is extremely militaristic and expansionist. According to this nation's values, democracy is non-negotiable.
Everything within the nation is determined by 9 revolutionary principles, with each principle representing a stripe on its flags. These principles are popular sovereignty under the rule of law, the triumph of progress over superstition, unity and diversity and rejection of absolutes, collective progress through social justice, protection of inalienable rights, accountability and responsibility, international solidarity and the spread of democracy, the spread of social egalitarianism, and most importantly, the non-negotiability of well-rounded progress.
Today, I stand before you to reaffirm the principles that make up our nation. The Ethanopianan people, long ago, were built on the ideals of democracy that still remain today. The Salarian Empire, world-conquering in its nature, believed that it could outshine our values. However, their great mystical artifacts were proven to be lies, and upon the collapse of the empire, we shall forge a new world by making sure that no such empire ever rises again. Our fight against Salarian imperialism is not only the rejection of conquest, but a commitment to the belief that all cultures and individuals are inherently equal. While we stand by our values of free speech and freedom of religion, we recognize that clear limits must be maintained. Freedom of speech does not apply to misinformation or hate speech, and freedom of religion does not include the right to have bigoted beliefs based on a commitment to perceived religious truths. Well-rounded social progress, including a commitment to democratic values and tolerance, is non-negotiable. While we shall be friendly with fellow democracies, the advancement of our cause shall be done by war. Look at the stars in the night sky and you shall see the destiny of empires. One day, as our scientific knowledge knows, they shall go up in a supernova, consuming everything in their path until they are finally defeated. However, upon their defeat, the stardust turns into planets, granting us the ability to not only exist but study these stars as reminders of a distant and shameful past. Through this, we know our mission, and we encourage you all to follow it. The remnants of authoritarianism have no place in our nation and the world, and it is our duty to ensure that this is followed through. Long live Ethanopiana and Omne Super Una.
This was a speech from Alexander Osovancha, the first president of the new Ethanopianan Republic. Born before the days of the Salarian Empire, he maintained a commitment to democracy throughout. For this reason, he is an immortal, though we now know this to be due to the results of technological advancement rather than use of perceived imperial magic. Of course, that's what the official narrative says. As an immortal, President Osovancha witnessed his country transition from a powerful democracy to a speck on the map, incapable of true liberation from imperial control. This is why Ethanopiana is as nationalist as it is. The Ethanopianan government doesn't allow for anyone to oppose its democratic agenda, so no one is allowed to. Beyond this, Ethanopiana has expanded its military with a clear and concise position. In a post-apocalyptic world, offense is the best defense. This is why, under Alexander Osovancha's initiative, the Ethanopianan nation has expanded and established new republics. Osovancha has even grown convinced enough to voluntarily withdraw his power and face an election against political opponents. With Osovancha's victory against Arol Tescan and Bernard Frazier, he continued his agenda of further democracy and progress. Ethanopiana's biggest enemy is not only authoritarianism abroad, but also internal forces that seek to oppose the worldwide spread of democracy. These include traditional Thracians and imperial revivalists, as there are still quite a few Ethanopianans who would prefer a direct transition to a Solarian system of governance. Some more conservative members of the Ethanopianan nation even wonder if the Federal Republic can truly claim to be a democracy, as the imposition of progressive values has already led to the forced reformation of entire religious institutions, especially the remnants of Catholicism and Thorax faith, which have been forcefully subjected to the Interfaith Alliance for Secular Democracy. This is why the revolutionary principles exist within Ethanopiana. There's no protection of free speech when it comes to misinformation or hate speech, and especially when it comes to its democracy. Those that would usually seek glory by joining authoritarian groups within Ethanopiana's government did continue the search, though mostly as soldiers in the Republican Expeditionary Corps, traveling through various lands in the Arctic and North Pacific regions. However, even this is not meant to last. As if Osavancha gets his way, the entire nation will completely collapse to authoritarian regimes. Let's continue the narrative by talking about Ethanopiana's glorious vassal states. Kemgutar remains within the Russian Far East, existing as a fortification for Ethanopiana within Russian territory. Kemgutar is highly militarized and covered with Ethanopianan military bases. All Kemgutans are taught that they are fighting for democracy to spread in Russia as part of a new identity based on democratic values. Beyond the military, however, Kemgutar has been constructed in a similar way to South Korea, in which people rely on a highly corporate economy and bureaucracy, as corporate control is the only way to prevent the nation from becoming a full-on military dictatorship. This is why feminism is particularly spread throughout Kemgutar, as empowering women keeps would-be strongmen in check.
The Republic of Alaska is a hotbed for Ethanopiana's works of social engineering, currently under my rule. The Alaskan government is incredibly progressive, mandating its ideology throughout the entire country. In fact, Alaska's military is entirely ideological, based on groups that benefit Ethanopiana's vast interests. The primary organization stationed within Alaska is Queers for Palestine, an organization meant to oppose Russian dominance over Israel and establish a progressive republic within the region. As Alaska's president, I am a Reform Jew who has banned conservative sects of Judaism for being too oppressive, arresting them for internalized anti-Semitism.
Meanwhile, the Republic of Hawaii was a recently established vassal following the forced abdication of the Hawaiian king. This nation serves as Ethanopiana's base in the Pacific, and a plan for the Republic to colonize nations in the far south, including Zealandia, which is rumored to house magical artifacts of the Solarian Empire. Because of this, the Ethanopianans don't pay that much attention to Hawaii, which has its upsides and downsides. On the upside, the Ethanopianans don't make it their mission to evangelize a standard doctrine to the Hawaiian people, allowing them to pretty much do whatever they want. On the downside, various bandits are allowed to stay supreme and even trade with Ethanopianan militiamen as long as they don't bother the port of Honolulu. However, the worst vassal state of Ethanopiana to be in is Wolkotia. Wolkotia is the old homeland of the Solarian Empire, a nation proud in its ancestral glories and inherent imperialism. Despite this, upon the creation of the Solarian Empire, Wolkotia gradually declined, giving way to newer realms such as China, Russia, Europe, and Thrakistan. This, of course, was not without reason. Aside from a few holy cities, Wolkotia lost its holiness and inherent grandeur within Thorax faith, as Egypt, a Thracian holy land, was once again under Thracian control for the first time in thousands of years. While the Wolkotians were assured in their nationalism, they were gradually assimilated into a larger identity that they too had to contribute to. Following the collapse of the Solarian Empire, the Wolkotian nation was hit the least at first. Despite this, several factions competed with each other to determine the future of Wolkotia. Some suggested that Wolkotia maintained the Solarian Empire as it was before the collapse, seeking to restore its old place and unify with other Solarian elements. Others suggested that Wolcotia ought to develop in a more modernized manner, reclaiming its identity as an entirely secular one, realizing that no one truly followed Thracian principles anymore. A righteous few suggested that Wolcotia try to restore its ancient glory by itself, separate from the stain of Solaria's legacy. However, none of these factions became victorious, as they instead entered a tumultuous civil war. Upon the Ethanopianan attack, no one even knew what was going on. Some initially thought that this was a joke media, a work of misinformation from other factions to trap them into a massacre. Others prepared, though even then they were dealt with by bandits and separatists who wished to reclaim their ancient ethnic identity, even if it was now as much of a joke as pretty much every ethnicity by now. In short, the Ethanopiana's conquest was more of a whimper than a bang, as their military leaders managed to manipulate each Wolcotian faction into focusing more on each other than chaos.
With this, they established the Third Wolcotian Republic, a nation established to spread a democratic and progressive agenda. Under the command of this republic, the entirety of Wolcotia's history and identity was rewritten. Suddenly, the Wolcotian people weren't the triumphant and civilized nation, but instead a group of brutal warmongers who were a part of an inherently authoritarian system. This republic has destroyed all elements of glory within, but no one could defy the will and desire of the Ethanopianan air forces, who could eliminate any remaining resistance from miles above their targets. In short, Ethanopiana's so-called progress was unstoppable. Wolcotia is now under the leadership of Wailo Valaku, a perfect mouthpiece for Ethanopianan propaganda. She was democratically elected by Wolcotia's population, well, by those whose political opinions are deemed safe enough by the Ethanopianan Bureau of Foreign Affairs. Despite this, Wailo's efforts have not gone to waste. Through her sheer cunning and might, she managed to present a standard narrative to the Wolcotian people. According to her propaganda, Wolcotia's history is not about celestial dragons and holy wars, but instead of a powerful and malicious empire seeking to ruin everyone's chance at a better future. Any deviation from this propaganda is classified as misinformation and hate speech, and any attempt to find the truth is made socially unacceptable by the Wolcotian business elite. However, just because the Republic is powerful doesn't mean it's exactly stable. While most formal resistance has been crushed, various smaller regions are under the control of monarchist guerrillas, criminal organizations, religious extremists, or bandits. Occasionally, there are villagers who just want to mind their own business that have to be dealt with, either bribed or forcefully joined. After all, while democracy is important, the shareholders need to restore the pre-collapse economy. And what's a traditional village or two when compared to the vast profits that could benefit all Ethanopianans if one replaces an old village with a government-approved farm? For this, the Wolcotian Republic has established the National Protection Army to preserve its goals of spreading democracy across the world.
For the average experience of a typical Wolcotian, let us hear a journal entry from one Radislav Yelts on February 2nd, 2632. My name is Radislav Yelts. I've been a part of the National Protection Army for 2 years now. Some members of the resistance have told me that I'm a traitor, but I don't care. My mission is exactly the same as it was back under the protection of the previous Wolcotian command zone and the royal guard of Duke Evanslav Stolokir. Restore order, protect civilians, and send a strong message to those who want to disturb the peace. The only difference is the master I serve and its nature. But I digress. Let the politicians do as they want while I protect civilians and keep the peace, regardless of what system I'm under. My mission is fairly simple. Go down to the village of Eskantorov and instill order, by force, if necessary. It's a prestigious site, rumored to sit on the location of Japitalu, the city that once had Wolcotia's imperial palace. As my army followed me there, I couldn't help but imagine what it was like for the old Wolcotian emperors living in such a beautiful city. There, I imagined the days before the Solarian Empire and its downfall. The world must have been so innocent back then. I pictured old monarchs and noblemen sitting on their throne nearby, small and joyful paintings,
while the sound of the call to prayer and church bells resounded. I imagined monks peacefully discussing theology under the keen but friendly eyes of painters, ready to show how life was like in this beautiful city. When I finally got there, the ruins were anything but underwhelming. Miles and miles of empty land stood before me, filled with the great architecture of empires long ago. I remember reading in history books what was then considered Gothic, Victorian, Neoclassical, and Andalusian architecture, from the beautiful pagodas in the west of the city to the gigantic palaces of the east, each of them looking like ancient cathedrals and mosques from who knows how long ago. And still, these buildings did not look like they were abandoned for long, but rather they were simply poorly maintained, due to them being understaffed. Still, it's not like anyone could tell the president no in her mission to fully democratize the Wolcatian nation. My army drove to the center of the village, its low population sharing a vast metropolis. Soon I got out of my truck to deliver my fellow citizens a sobering message. After reluctantly turning on the speaker, everyone could hear the speech of President Alexander Osavancha.
People of Eskantorov, this village lies in the heart of what was once Japetalu. Because of this, it is our duty to ensure that it follows republican standards. The old empire was an aggressive nation built off of conquest and destruction, necessitating a transformation within its citizens. Ethanopiana's commitment to human rights ensures that while these buildings will not be bulldozed, we must be honest when talking about our nation's imperial past. For this reason, Republican banners shall be placed everywhere, and you will know well that your mythical artifacts are indeed mythical. Hand over every item and artifact that was considered sacred by the empire to us.
The ultimate victory of the Third Wolcatian Republic was not won in a defiant battle, but a simple act of military conquest. The villagers, unprepared to face the full onslaught of an army, agreed to hand over artifacts once considered sacred. Thus, we worked on searching the city together, looking for old royal items to put in the Museum of a Shameful Past back in Los Angeles. Of course, we were expecting to find absolutely nothing of true or magical value, and it's true. Magic has been proven to be fake, and all of Solaria's perceived mysterious glory was a lie. No one could deny this anymore. Here's a journal entry narrated exactly 1 month later. Yesterday, I learned of several reports of people entering the ruins of the old Gapitalu Palace and traveling through its vast corridors, only to have a sudden heart attack upon entering a certain room, playfully remarked as the antechamber of imperial despair. I initially thought this to be a myth, just another attempt for the pitiful monarchists to end their lives. After all, while I could understand why one would be a monarchist before we entered this village, I couldn't now. Even the monarchical resistance was broken by the torrential assault of the 2nd Guerrilla Brigade, showcasing our immense and unassailable power before Wolcatian monarchs. We even offered Wolcatian monarchists full pardons for leaving the resistance and becoming typical citizens of our republic, in exchange for a public renunciation of all imperial loyalties. I expected to see absolutely nothing upon arriving to the antechamber, believing that it would be present only to the suicides of embarrassed monarchists who couldn't stand to be wrong. I arrogantly strutted through the halls, ready to shout words of mockery at remaining monarchists, before turning the antechamber into an exhibition aimed towards remaining monarchists who dared to challenge the will of the people. We even had our first fully democratic election not too long ago, bringing our first woman president into office as a symbol for the unity democracy could bring. However, upon my arrival into this antechamber, I gained a sudden realization of exactly how wrong I was. Within this room was a large staff suspended in air, shooting bolts of lightning and fire above it. Despite its silent voice, I could see within it old symbols in the archaic Wolcatian logography, a 1,500-year-old system that the Wolcatian people used back in the days when they were an empire. Almost like a holographic, a powerful image stood up of the life enjoyed by the Wolcatian people in the heyday of their empire. There I saw the days of dancing farmers, singing monks, and spiritual adherents of the faith, imagining the days of old within Wolcatia, where the nation fully devoted itself to God. What startled me more? I did not have a heart attack, seizure, or anything of the like, but rather I bowed down in reverence. However, just as I bowed before this staff, a voice came out of it. "I am neither your Lord nor God. Why do you bow to me?" My gaze softened slightly, my eyes turning towards the staff as I tried to give a response, but was too speechless to respond. The staff remained monotonous, but it continued.
I can tell that you have a fire in your heart to restore the empire of long ago. But how can an idolatrous Republican who turned his back on God restore an empire ruined by its most pious men?
This short story is a microcosm of what's going on in Ethanopiana today.
The Ethanopianan government is increasing control over its own population through implementing a disgusting democratic system, while a few members of the nation's dissident right seek to challenge the Ethanopianan government and rebuild the world. Members of Ethanopiana's military and government are pissed off enough that a coup is possible, though no one knows how it even would succeed, if at all. Many are concerned that Ethanopiana's future would be the grave, though a few still have their hopes up. One day in the Ethanopianan capital of minority, a group of people may once again say the sacred Solarian prayer.
The Lord is the divine source of creation. He who is beyond all, the honored, blessed, and great, most beautiful, most powerful, most righteous, and most loving. Amen.